Welcome back to Yang Daily. I went more in depth on some polls and articles today, so this is going to run a bit long. Well, let's get to it. First off, I want to quickly emphasize how important it is that we share this podcast. The Yang Gang has over 200,000 hardcore active members. It takes me a few hours a day to collect all this news. If the rest of the gang are doing likewise, that means we're losing over 600,000 hours per day on getting caught up. 600,000 hours that could instead be spent phone banking or otherwise helping get Yang elected. It might be less or more depending on what sources you're using, but it's significant. Every time we get another listener on this podcast is hours saved every day. This is why I started the podcast, but I need your help spreading it. The faster, the better. I think you get the point. Moving on. The $1 million donation goal ends tonight at midnight Eastern, 11 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Pacific. We're only at 460K right now, which means we need to raise more than 660K in the next 7 hours. We're less than 2 weeks out from Iowa, guys. This is not the time to come up short. Whatever you're planning to donate in the future, donate it now because it's going to have 10 times more impact now than it will after Iowa votes. Get yourself a math hat, a shirt, a hoodie, a yard sign. Get them for your friends and neighbors. We've done over 1 million in a day before. Let's not lose steam at the finish line. Humanity for Yang is conducting a Twitter poll to try and find out what's keeping people from phone banking. Hopefully all my listeners are phone banking already, so this doesn't apply to you, but if something's holding you back, please visit the link and indicate whether it is anxiety, time, motivation, or something else. The more we know about the problem, the easier it will be to help people get on the phones. I'd also welcome any listeners to tweet at me at Yang Daily Cast if you'd like to share what's limiting you, or of course to give any feedback on the podcast. Don't forget that we're trending hashtag call for Yang on Twitter today, and don't forget that it's a call to action, not just a hashtag. For any of you who just need help getting started or want advice or support, Epic Yang Ganger Candace B, phone banking expert, is offering 15-minute support sessions to help you get going. Download the call app Zoom, install it, and follow the link in the description. I also want to be clear on something. When you phone bank for the campaign, they are not asking you to convince anyone of anything. All they actually want is for you to ask a couple of simple questions like where Yang ranks for that person, and that's it. That data is used by our canvassers in the early states so they know where to go and who to talk to. It's not arguing, it's not a production, it's just collecting data with a couple of questions. It's something you can handle, I promise you. In events for tomorrow, there are ballot petition events going on in Indiana to stop by a coffee shop and sign the petition to get Yang on the ballot. Town halls in Clinton, Wapello, Muscatine, and Davenport. Still canvassing, phone banking, and precinct captain training events all over the early states. Still signature gathering all over New York. Canvassing events in Friendswood, Aspen, San Francisco, and Nashville. Phone banking in Portland, Westminster, Fountain Valley, Pittsburgh, and Harrisburg. Yang hangs in Burlington, Columbia, Sioux City, Corvallis, Oakland, Lawrence, Iowa City, Fort Collins, and Denver. An event to meet delegates from Yang, Bernie, and Warren in New York. A UBI info session in Keokuk. Signature gathering in Rhode Island and Elkhart. Text banking, Yang hang in Minneapolis. Carlson Tueller, Yang's policy advisor, is speaking in Brooklyn. There's a house party in Cresco. There's signature submission in Fort Wayne, a dinner for canvas training featuring congressional candidate David Kim in Los Angeles, Hawaii's weekly volunteer call, and phone bank training in Berlin, Connecticut. Monmouth released a new national poll today that had some pretty awesome news. While Yang came in low in this one at 3%, it also found the only Democratic candidate who came out with a positive net favorability, meaning more likes than dislikes, among all voters is our very own Andrew Yang. If you're thinking those two facts don't seem to align, recall that the Democratic polls systematically exclude the majority of Yang's voter base, that being youth and people who did not vote Democrat in the last election. Also, while the overall favorability polling sampled 847 registered voters, the Democrat sample size was only 372, with a very large margin of error of 5.1%. The cross-party favorability result is just further evidence that Yang is the strongest candidate for the general election. It's also further evidence that the only thing most voters really need in order to swing to Yang is to believe that he's a viable choice. That evidence will come from good placement in Iowa, just as it did for Obama and so many other populist presidents. At the risk of mimicking a broken record, this is why it's so important that we phone bank to Iowa as much as humanly possible before February 3rd. Combine this with yesterday's poll finding the majority of voters are undecided, and it couldn't be more clear that this race is up for grabs, Yang Gang. We need only put in the effort. If you care about the other candidates' polling positions, Biden has 30%, Bernie 23%, Warren 14%, Bloomberg 9%, Pete 6%, and Amy 5%. Quite different from what we've seen before, including Yang being under 5%, but likely explained by the large margin of error from the small sample size. The poll also measured favorability among just Democrats and found Yang in 4th place, with by far the highest rate of favorability growth throughout the race, and with the 3 above him, being Bernie, Biden, and Warren, either stagnant or dropping in favorability since last January. To put it simply, the more people learn about the other candidates, they like them the same or less. The more people learn about Yang, the more they like him. Incidentally, the poll also asked participants how they felt about the primary voting schedule, and a whopping 58% said they would like to do away with states voting at different times, instead having everyone vote simultaneously. My own feelings on this are surprisingly mixed. While I consider it absolutely abhorrent that a few states have an enormously outsized influence on the outcome of the primary, particularly when the first state has almost no racial diversity at all, I also must acknowledge that Iowa and New Hampshire have better voting methodology than most states. Iowa uses caucuses, which puts much less pressure on voters to go to a presumably viable big-name candidate, as it allows them to change their vote if their first pick has insufficient support. This means people are far more likely to vote initially for who they actually want, which is vitally important to a functioning democracy, the failure of which lands us with general elections, where we must choose between the 2 candidates the media painted as viable, but who few voters actually like. New Hampshire, on the other hand, has open primaries allowing anyone to vote any party. As things are now, it might actually make things worse for non-establishment candidates if we removed Iowa and New Hampshire's power. What would actually fix the problem is adopting Yang's policy of ranked choice voting across the country, which works like the Iowa caucuses, except it can be done through the mail. All states using ranked choice voting on the same day would be an immensely more democratic system, yielding winners far more likely to be representative of voters' actual preferences. In other news, the campaign aired a new ad in Iowa today where Yang speaks directly to the camera on how his experience creating nonprofit businesses is more valuable than the other candidates' political experience. Personally, I think this is a really important argument, though not one that the ad delivered well. Voters are conditioned to consider political experience a boon, yet these are the same people achieving record low productivity and approval ratings in the government. Why do voters say that they hate that our congresspeople get nothing done, and then turn around and vote for those people back in, heralding their valuable experience at getting nothing done? What should be an argument of competence has been twisted into an argument for seniority, and it makes no sense. Experience is only valuable when it leads to results. Yang has put together a platform and campaign on short notice with no political experience that has political experts in awe and voters of all ideologies and demographics looking to him more favorably than anyone else in the race. That is what a competent politician looks like. That is what a competent leader looks like. While the rest have been stagnating our country's progress in partisan tribalism, Yang has been out in the real world developing a deep understanding of how the economy works and doesn't work, creating charities, and steering young people away from Wall Street and into entrepreneurship. While politicians have secondhand knowledge of the economy and healthcare, the 2 biggest issues in America, Yang has firsthand knowledge, which is why he speaks in greater depth on these and so many other issues than any other candidate can. And working in the real world is part of why he connects to people so much better than other candidates do. He is a citizen politician, not a career politician, which is exactly what the people have demanded in all recent elections. His lack of political experience is not a weakness, it's a strength. Congressman of Silicon Valley, Mike Honda, officially endorsed Yang today. Welcome to the future, Mike. Catherine Miller of BuzzFeed News wrote an article arguing that Yang is part of a new generation of political candidates. It covers how Yang came out of nowhere to build a compelling campaign and raise incredible funds from grassroots donations to outlast many established politicians, as well as how the media have given him extremely low coverage in both quality and quantity compared to similarly polling establishment candidates. His points on expanding our economic measures beyond just GDP, the frightening hidden statistics of our country's actual health, how DC is the richest city in the country, despite producing almost nothing, and so on. One uncommon inclusion was a line from his town hall where he explained how social stress is far different for kids today, no longer able to come home and escape from their peers because social media means their peers can follow them anywhere. This, of course, relating to his policy on regulating apps. The article, however, also subtly undermines the perception of Yang as a viable candidate and the support for his policies. For example, the author noted how much fun Yang and everyone else have at his events, how casual he is with the people. A positive, one would think. This was then contrasted with how Warren remained calm at one of her events, where she was dogged by people calling her disgusting and telling her to resign, and somehow the author came to the conclusion that this shows Warren is more presidential than Yang. That logic clearly went over my head. The author also implied that Yang doesn't have time to grow popular enough to win, and that if he did, he could possibly, quote, collapse under the increased press scrutiny given over toward, say, how exactly UBI would work, and whether you can make a non-regressive value-added tax. This, despite Yang providing a great deal more evidence in the form of countless research papers and trials to back up his claims on UBI, and the VAT being used effectively in every industrialized country of the world, except for ours, of course, with Yang's VAT differing only in applying different rates to different goods. In other words, Yang backs up his policies with far more evidence than most candidates. I'm looking at you, wealth tax, making it a fairly absurd avenue of attack against him. Ms. Miller also describes UBI as, quote, a policy favored by some libertarians, a handful of progressives, and people who believe the federal government's only true talent is writing checks, end quote. Quite the dismissal for a policy that recently polled at 61% favorability. In case you don't track this stuff, that's remarkably high in politics. The campaign posted a clip of Yang throwing axes in Osage, Iowa today. He's actually getting quite decent at it. There was also a clip of him playing piano at his Mason City town hall. Add this to the skills of skateboarding and crowd surfing. Cool it, Yang, you're making the rest of us look bad. Today's policy, in light of the recent poll, is ranked choice voting. In this form of voting, each voter ranks their top 3 candidates from 1 to 3. Every voter's choice is tallied. If one candidate receives over 50% of the vote, they win outright. If not, the candidate with the fewest votes is eliminated. Then, everyone who listed the eliminated candidate as their first choice has their second choice considered, a process which continues until someone breaks 50%. The observed benefits of this system include higher voter turnout, better capturing voter preferences, less appeals to party extremes, and lower levels of negative campaigning. The most important benefit, of course, being that we'd have a better chance of ending up with candidates people really want, since they can vote for who they believe in and still have a backup vote for one of the candidates being pushed as viable. Today's Yang Daily 10 task, once again, phone banking, though the team does offer coordinated skydiving with letters to spell out Yang's name as an alternative activity in honor of National Skydiving Day. If you can do both at the same time, you'll be an immortal hero, though I doubt the Iowan you call would hear much more than wind. But seriously, please phone bank for at least 10 minutes a day. This is essential to winning the leadership that we all want and need. And that's our Yang News for today. Buy some merch or donate directly to reach our goal. Hit up the phone banking Twitter poll. Check local events. Trend call for Yang. Literally call for Yang. And if you need help, sign up with Candace. As always, please share this podcast so we can save people as much time as possible for volunteering. And don't forget to Yang Daily.